back in the Open Exchange East Africa. Let's focus on a few issues across borders now. And the key drivers of the South African economy, as many other African states, is a strong relationship between the government and business. This, according to former mayor of the District of Columbia, Anthony Williams, as administration oversaw a period of greater prosperity, urban renewal, and budget surpluses for Washington, D.C. He now joins us in studio to share insights on how many African states can replicate the same success. Anthony, many thanks for joining us. I mean, business and government, or if I may say, business and politics, is inseparable. Yet we tend to get it twisted whenever we're trying to do one and not the other. Give us a sense of how this worked for you.
For me, business and politics and a relationship between them is particularly difficult in a capital city like Washington, D.C., where the national government is so present, and I would dare say even dominant. But how do you leverage those advantages? There are diplomatic advantages in terms of international trade, international investment. There are advantages that you can leverage in terms of tourism, advantages in terms of technology and innovation, whether it be healthcare or cybersecurity. It's taking the benefits of that relationship with a national government, with that national presence, and really exploiting it for your people.
And Anthony, I understand that you're doing some work in the city of Tshwane, which is very much similar to Washington in the sense of a strong government presence. Now, I'm just interested in what do you go about fixing first? So what do you prioritize? Is it the public services in terms of education, hospitals, schools? Is it business relations, in crime? What's the priority first?
You know, I use the analogy of getting government working is getting the train going again. In order to get a train going again, you need to get the locomotive fired up and ready to go. That's your basic economy. The number one thing you've got to do to really get on the emerging track again is create expectations where people want to come back to your city to live, where people want to invest. How do you set up that framework? It's not just tax incentives. It's really government doing its job reliably, dependably, with security. That's expectations. If I know it's going to take me a year to get my business established, and it takes a year, that's good. If you tell me it's going to take a year, and it takes 4 years or 8 years, or I'm not really sure, that's not good.
Well, CNBC Africa's Oni Sunday is standing by from West Africa to join in on the conversation. Now, Oni, it's over to you.
Well, thank you so much. Now, do you think African cities will do better if power is decentralized? Let's talk about the role of governance right now when it comes to the survival of most African cities. We do understand, like in a country like Nigeria, for instance, there's heavy dependence on what comes from the center, talking about what comes from the federal government. How do you think cities will fare better if power is decentralized?
I think cities can fare better where power is decentralized because cities know well how government optimally, most ably will work because cities are closest to the problem. I always say it, you know, it's a joke, but it's true. There's no one lower in government than a mayor because you are directly close to the people. So you have to experiment, you have to innovate, but you have to deliver. So if government can set national standards, which it should, provide a national economic platform, for example, in insurance, you need the national government to do something like that. But then provide the funding to local government to apply general principles on the ground to solving real problems. I think that's the way to do it.
Anthony, obviously looking at the biggest need for a population or a society would be services from its government. While this tends to get caught up in prioritization based on a location or just the political priorities of the leadership at a time, how do you walk this tightrope?
I think it is a tightrope because, for example, you want to bring investment to your city, but at the same time as you bring investment to your city, you get that locomotive going. There's no point in having a locomotive if there are no cars connected to it. Then you don't really have a train. The 1% we all talk about in my country, that's a locomotive just driving around with no cars behind it. So you need the cars. On the other hand, if you have 100 cars and no locomotive, what good is that? So the balance that a mayor has to make in a city is you have to achieve efficiency in your economy, but you also have to maintain the right balance of equity, providing for health care, providing for affordable housing, providing for youth education, powerfully in my country, even more powerfully in Africa, certainly in South Africa. Transit to connect people to jobs, very, very important.
Sorry for jumping in there.
No
I wanted to say, in terms of improving efficiencies of municipalities, as we call them here, a lot of that is stifled by irregular expenditure, and a lot of that also being stifled by corruption. So I'm interested in how you overcame this. I'm sure corruption and wasteful expenditure is not an African problem alone.
Absolutely. It's a big problem in our country. It's a problem in many cities I've visited around the world where I've worked on various projects. And I always say that if you're a mayor of a city, you're maintaining what I call what a lot of people call the public realm. It's a commons, it's a shared responsibility of a community. The centerpiece of a strong community, of a reliable government, is transparency and accountability. That your number one goal to start building this momentum and this emergence is creating accountability and public trust and transparency. Those are the kinds of expectations I'm talking about. If this is a Wizard of Oz and don't look behind the curtain, you're not going to get very far. You need openness.
Now, Anthony, it's really easy to talk about what the government should do and what the business community should do when we talk about, reinvigorating African cities. I'm more interested in community participation here. Just talk us through the importance and the role of community participation when it comes to developing African cities.
I'm a big believer. In my city, I had something called citizen summits, where every 2 years I would have 4,000 citizens would spend a day with me and my cabinet talking about a plan and a budget for the city. I'm a big believer that you can have a high-achieving government, a high-performance government, but not at the exclusion of involving the community. I think it's so important. Totally agree.
And lastly, let's see about budget constraints, because that's a problem across many municipalities as well, and particularly in South Africa. We're in a path of fiscal consolidation. So how do you achieve all of this, but in a tight budget? Managing your costs, rather.
Well, this was our colleague was saying, well, how do you involve citizen participation? I think part of governing is making choices, and part of making choices and having them stick is having the faith and confidence of your constituency. How do you build that faith and confidence with your constituency? It's the transparency, accountability, trust I talked about. You're delivering services reliably. Then your citizens will trust you. Once they trust and respect you, they'll allow you to make some tough calls, because people are actually smart. They know you have to make choices, but you have to build their trust first with those basic things.
Well, that is where we leave it. Thank you so much, Anthony. We have run out of time. Quite an invigorating conversation there on restoring cities and growth. But that's where we leave it from the Open Exchange team here in South Africa. Remember to stay connected with us on Twitter at CNBC Africa using the hashtag OBSA410, and you can tweet Bonnie and I personally at Fifi Peters and Bonnie Atunya. Now, Bonnie, any final words before we hand over to Ani?
That's right. There's certainly a lot we can learn from the city of DC, but I think it all goes into the willingness of whoever is in charge.
Now, Ani, I understand we've eaten quite a bit into your time there, hopefully not upsetting too many of your viewers. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Fifi. And that was Anthony Williams, the former mayor of the District of Columbia. Well, a very good morning and welcome to Open Exchange West Africa. I'm Onyi Sunday, and I'm not alone in the studio today. I have Kayode Atundile, a partner at TIA Cap.